Good afternoon everyone. Welcome to the daily news analysis of the next IAS. Today is the 19th June 2025. Let's start with the today's topics. So the topics which we are going to discuss today are UN Ocean Conference and its outcome. Second is Operation Sindhu, important from the general studies 2 perspective, Indian diaspora and its issues. Third is regarding the reset in India-Canada ties, important from GS2 international relations perspective. Fourth is trade tariffs and invasive alien species, important from GS3 environmental conservation perspective. The last one is India-U.S. partnership, need of resetting. So let's start with the today's topic. First is regarding the UN Ocean Conference. The backdrop of this particular news lies in the fact that United Nations Ocean Conference 3rd edition was concluded last week in France, and this particular topic is important from the GS2 important perspective of important international institutions, agencies, fora and their structure as well as the mandate, and GS3 environmental conservation. So let's start. Basically, this United Nations Ocean Conference was concluded in Nice, France, and in this particular conference, Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Agreement, which is also called as the High Seas Treaty, but out of that only 56 have ratified this particular treaty, and to be legally applicable this treaty need to be ratified by the at least 60 countries, which is still in the process. So let's go into the basics. What is United Nations Ocean Conference? Basically, this is a kind of major international forum focused on supporting Sustainable Development Goal 14, which is about conserving and sustainably using oceans, seas and marine resources, and it aims to address the challenges like marine pollution, overfishing, climate change, and it also encourages the policy coordination and financial commitments between the different nations of the earth. This was the third edition of this United Nations Ocean Conference, with primary aim of accelerating ocean conservation efforts, also aimed to accelerate the global efforts to protect the oceans, focusing on the areas beyond the national jurisdiction, that is open seas. This conference was co-hosted by France and Costa Rica. The theme was accelerating action and mobilizing efforts of all actors to conserve and sustainably use the ocean. So this was the theme of the conference. This conference supported the implementation of Sustainable Development Goal 14, that is life below water. Main goals included establishing marine protected areas in international waters, that is high seas, preventing overfishing and regulating deep sea mining, across the open seas. It also supported a global target via the Convention on the Biological Diversity, that is protecting 30% of marine and coastal areas by 2030. So it aims to implement this particular target through ratification and enforcement of BBNJ agreement, that is High Seas Treaty. So let's go into the detail of this Biodiversity Beyond the National Jurisdiction Treaty. First let's go into the scope and significance. Basically, this Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Agreement applies to ocean areas beyond the national jurisdiction, that is the global commons or high seas. Once enforced, this treaty will create the marine protected areas in the high seas. It will mandate the environmental impact assessment of the various projects that are going to be conducted in the high seas. Then it will regulate the marine genetic resources of various marine organisms that are present in the high seas. Then promotion of capacity building of developing nations with reference to different activities they are conducting in the high seas areas. The treaty requires 60 countries ratification to trigger the 120 days counting before becoming legally binding. 160 countries have signed this particular treaty, but so far only 56 countries have ratified this. India and United States of America have not ratified this treaty yet, and as per the statement of our Minister of Science and Tech, India is in the process of ratification of this treaty. The first Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Agreement Conference of Parties is expected in late 2026. So what are the key hurdles to the BBNJ implementation. The main bone of contention lies in sharing of benefits from marine genetic resources. There have been multiple differences between developed and developing nations regarding this. Basically, high seas contains exotic life forms which have tremendous potential to be commercially valuable, and sharing of the benefits arising out of it is the bone of contention between the countries. There is so far no consensus on how the benefits should be shared, as high seas belong to no single country. Environmental groups argue that without an extraction ban from the high seas, oceans all over the world remains under threat. So, what are the major achievements of this third edition of the United Nations Ocean Conference? Basically, multiple countries have voluntarily announced commitments regarding this protection and conservation of the world's oceans. First of all, European Commission have declared 1 billion euro, placed 1 billion euros for ocean conservation, science and sustainable fishing all over the world. Then French Polynesia, it pledged to create world's largest marine protected area in Pacific Ocean, which will be equivalent to 5 million square kilometer. New Zealand committed over 52 million US dollar for ocean governance in Pacific Islands. Germany launched 100 million euro action program for clearing the old munitions or legacy munitions from Baltic and North Seas, which have been planted during Cold War era or World War II period. The next is High Ambition Coalition for Quiet Ocean. This coalition is formed by 37 countries and it is led by Panama and Canada to address the ocean noise pollution. Then Italy has pledged 6.5 million euros for marine surveillance and oil platform monitoring. Canada has pledged 9 million US dollar to support the climate resilience in small island developing states which are facing the threat of climate change induced global warming and sea level rise. Spain has decided to establish 5 new marine protected areas aiming to protect 25% of its marine territory. And various UN agencies have launched One Ocean Finance Initiative to unlock the funds for blue economy sectors. So, these are the various pledges conveyed by various countries or organizations for the ocean protection or conservation initiatives. So, this is the practice question. Consider the following statements regarding the United Nations Ocean Conference and biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction agreement. Please solve this question. Next is Operation Sindhu. So, what is the backdrop? Government of India has launched Operation Sindhu to evacuate Indian nationals from Iran in the context of conflict that has been going on between Iran and Israel. So, this particular topic is important from GS2 perspective, that is effect of policies and politics of developed and developing nations on India's interest as well as the issues concerning the Indian diaspora. So, let us start with Operation Sindhu. Basically, this Operation Sindhu has been launched to evacuate Indian nationals from Iran amid the escalating conflict with Israel, which has been started in last few days ago. It is launched on June 18 by Government of India. So, what are the government statements and advisories? Basically, Ministry of External Affairs, which has been coordinating this operation, says that India prioritize safety of Indian nationals abroad. Ministry of External Affairs actively assisting the movement to safer areas within Iran. Those Indian nationals who have been there in the conflict zones, Government of India has trying to relocate them to the safer areas within Iran, and also working on the further evacuation through available and feasible options. Also, the Indian nationals are advised to stay in touch with the Indian Embassy in Tehran as well as using 24/7 Ministry of External Affairs control room in New Delhi. So, this is about the Ministry of External Affairs advisory to the Indian nationals. Regarding the logistics arrangements and challenges, basically in Iran, there are more than 4,000 Indians reside and half of them are students. India is actively working with friendly neighboring countries like Armenia, Turkmenistan and Iraq to arrange the evacuation of Indian nationals from the Iran as soon as possible. Regarding the other neighboring countries of the Iran like Afghanistan, India has no formal ties because of the Taliban regime there. Then again, India has a strained ties with Turkey as well as Azerbaijan, which these countries have supported Pakistan during the Operation Sindhu. So India has a strained ties with them. Then India is also exploring the alternate evacuation routes via the Persian Gulf or through the Saudi Arabia and Kuwait to evacuate Indian citizens as early as possible. So in the context of this Operation Sindhu, we must look into the operations conducted by the Ministry of External Affairs as well as the Indian Army or Air Force in the recent past. So the first is important about Operation Maitri, that was conducted in the context of tremendous earthquake in Nepal, which happened in 2015. Then Operation Insaniyat, which it was conducted as a humanitarian assistance for the Bangladesh in the context of Rohingya refugees. Then Operation Sahayata, it was conducted in 2019 in the context of Cyclone Idai relief in Mozambique, Africa. This Operation Vanilla was conducted in 2020 in the context of Cyclone Dian in relief in Madagascar. Then Operation Samudra Setu, it was again conducted in 2020 for COVID-19 evacuation of from Indian Ocean countries. Then Vaccine Maitri, this was a global COVID-19 vaccine supply initiative by India to supply the vaccines for friendly countries. Then Operation Devi Shakti, which was conducted in 2021-22 for evacuation and humanitarian aid to the Afghanistan in the context of regime taking over by the Taliban in Afghanistan. Then Operation Ganga, this was conducted in 2022 for evacuation of Indian students in the Russia-Ukraine conflicts from the Ukraine. Then Operation Upahar, it was conducted in 2022 to support the economic crisis-ridden country of Sri Lanka. Then Operation Dost, this was a operation to support Turkey as well as Syria in the context of earthquake. Then Operation Kaveri was conducted in 2023 for the evacuation of Indian nationals from the conflict hit Sudan. And this Operation Brahma, this was conducted in 2024-25 as a earthquake relief measure in Myanmar. So these are the important operations conducted by India in recent past. So this is the practice question. Match the following pairs of Indian operations with their respective purposes. Please solve this question. The next news is about the reset of ties between India and Canada in the backdrop of G7 summit. Basically, India and Canada have agreed to re-establish diplomatic ties 2 years after a major diplomatic rupture. This topic is important from GS2 international relations perspective. Let's go into the detail. Basically, 2 years after the major diplomatic breakdown, India and Canada have agreed to re-establish the diplomatic ties and explore the resumption of trade negotiations, visa services and other dialogue mechanisms. This agreement was reached during meeting between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney on the sidelines of G7 outreach session. So first is about restoration of the diplomats. Both nations have agreed to reinstate high commissioners in New Delhi and Ottawa respectively. Then resuming of the trade talks, negotiations on the early progress trade agreement are to be restarted, and which will eventually pave the way for comprehensive economic partnership agreement between India and Canada. Then there have been discussions on the collaboration in the various areas like clean energy, digital transformation, artificial intelligence, liquefied natural gas, food security, critical minerals, higher education, mobility and supply chain resilience. Then also it led to the cautious handling of mutually sensitive issues, like none of the Prime Minister have mentioned the killing of Niger, Khalistani separatist activist from Canada. And however, Canadian Prime Minister raised concerns about transnational repression. So, what were the causes of India and Canada's diplomatic rift? Basically, in 2023, former Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau accused Indian government agents of involvement in the killing of Khalistani activist Hardeep Singh Najjar and plotting attacks on other Sikh activists which are residing in the Canada. Again, Royal Canadian Mounted Police reportedly implicated Indian Home Minister in its investigations. A Canadian intelligence report to be released in the parliament states that India's alleged involvement in the Najjar killings marks a major escalation in efforts to suppress the Khalistan movement, and it shows the clear intent to target individuals in North America. This development, which is likely to happen in near future, will continue to strengthen the India-Canada relations in near future. So, what was the India's response to the accusations made by the former Prime Minister of the Canada, PM Justin Trudeau? India categorically denied all the allegations. Also, in 2023, India suspended visa services for Canadians, citing threats to the Indian diplomats, and expelled nearly 2/3 of the Canadian High Commission staff for engaging in non-diplomatic activities. In the backdrop of this, there were further diplomatic expulsions in October 2024. Canada expelled Indian High Commissioner and 5 diplomats, while India retaliated to this move by expelling 6 Canadian diplomats and accusing Canada of extremism, violence and separatism against India. So, this was the kind of diplomatic rift or rupture between India in the context of killing of Khalistani separatist activist Hardeep Singh Najjar. The role of US government need to be seen in the context of this diplomatic rupture. Basically, US government has indicted Indian official in similar case involving alleged assassination plot against another Khalistani activist, but more discreetly than Canada, while other members of Five Eyes intelligence that like UK and Germany have raised their concerns regarding targeting of activists bilaterally. So, this was the major diplomatic rift episode between India and Canada. Then, what are the causes or what are the initiatives of the recent breakthrough in the ties between India and Canada? Basically, change in the leadership in the Canada. Justin Trudeau resigned and he was succeeded by the Mark Carney, creating opportunity for diplomatic thaw and pressing the reset button between the bilateral ties. So, what is the current status? Both nations are actively working to restore the ties and focus on other issues of significance. So, it remains to be seen what evidence is brought forward in the Canadian trial in the context of killing of Khalistani activist Hardeep Singh Najjar, and also how Delhi and Ottawa will navigate the ties once the trial begins. So, what is the strategic significance of Canada for India? This also needs to be seen in the context of this reset of the bilateral ties. The first and foremost is regarding the energy and natural resources. Canada is one of the major supplier of the uranium, not just to India but also to the world. Canada holds significant reserves of lithium, cobalt, rare earth minerals, and which are key to the India's clean energy and EV goals, electric vehicle goals. Then trade potential, basically in trade potential between two countries is estimated to be the 12 billion Canadian dollar in 2022, and there is a further scope to expand after the early progress trade agreement between the two countries. People to people ties, basically there are more than 1.4 million Indian origin people residing in Canada, which constitute almost 4% of its population, providing a strong cultural and political bridge or kind of living bridge between the two countries. Technological cooperation, collaboration in the areas of artificial intelligence, clean technology, life sciences offer scope for joint research and co-development between the two countries. Indo-Pacific Convergence, basically Canada's new Indo-Pacific strategy identifies India as a key regional partner for ensuring free, open and rule-based order in the Indo-Pacific. Then multilateral engagement, both countries are active in G20, United Nations, Commonwealth, WTO, offering platforms for coordination on the global governance, trade and development. So, this is the strategic as well as the tactical significance of Canada for India. So, let us start with the question. Consider the following organization. Please solve this MCQ. Next topic of discussion is regarding the trade tariffs and invasive alien species. So, what is the backdrop? In the surge in the global trade since 1800 has indirectly contributed to the biological invasion in both terrestrial as well as the aquatic ecosystem, and in the context of trade tariffs close the borders, but it will lead to opening of invasive alien species in the different areas of the world. So, what is the relevance of this particular topic? General Studies 3, invasive species, environmental conservation. What are the invasive alien species? Invasive alien species are the non-native plants or animals or pathogens or organisms when introduced into the new ecosystem can cause environmental or economic damage and also pose risks to the human health. So, this is about the definition of the invasive alien species. Now, this particular article starts with the story of giant African snail, which is also invasive alien species in the context of India. This giant African snail was introduced in India around 1847 in colonial Calcutta, likely through plant crates or trade goods from the East Africa. This particular snail, that is giant African snail, was initially admired for its large size and shell. Again, this giant African snail thrived in Indian environment because of the warm, humid climate and absence of predators in Indian mainland. Then from Bengal gardens, it spread to the Western Ghats with human assistance. By mid 20th century, it caused damage to the crops and ornamental plants, displacement of the native snails, alteration in the soil ecosystems all over India, and become a carrier of rat lungworm, which has also endangered the lives of humans as well as the wildlife. Poor quarantine system, weak monitoring and policy failures enable the spread of this giant African snail into 19th and 20th century India. So, let us go into certain examples or history of global trade and biological invasions of invasive alien species in different part of the world. Since 1800, global trade has surged tremendously in the context of industrial revolution that had started in England. Then it led to the increasing biological invasions in terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems all over the world. Alien species numbers increased by 20-fold in early 19th century in the context of global trade. Then trade partnership all over the world increased from 76 countries in 1948 to 186 countries in early 2000. So, and also the recent trade policy shifts by the United States, tariffs under Trump, have created new trade routes, raising the fear of invasive alien species all over the world. So, what are the pathways for introduction of these invasive alien species? Some species, invasive alien species, have been deliberately introduced in different parts of the world. For example, cane toads in Australia, gambusia fish in India, Posilia reticulata in Japan. Most of these deliberate introductions have tremendously backfired and they have turned out to be the invasive alien species in those countries. This introduction of invasive alien species is not just deliberate; it happened accidental in some of the cases through either import or export of trade items like timber, fruits, grains, and plants. Also via ballast water or biofouling in ships. Basically, this biofouling refers to the accumulation of microorganisms, plants, algae, small animals on wet surfaces that have mechanical function causing structural or other functional deficiencies. So, basically this is a kind of accumulation of microorganism, plants, algae on wet surfaces that have mechanical function causing structural and other functional deficiencies. The Asian paddle crab was introduced in Northwest Pacific and East Asian waters of New Zealand, where it carries the white spot syndrome virus. This is again one more example how invasive alien species have created havoc in the countries they have been introduced into. So, in the context of new trade ties or new trade tariffs being imposed by America under the presidency of Trump, what are the biosecurity challenges? Basically, new or shifting of trade ties may overlook the strict biosecurity for quick trade gains. Then many nations like developing countries or underdeveloped countries lack the infrastructure to monitor the imports and exports, and possibility of introduction of invasive alien species in the country. India is vulnerable to the rising trade and weak enforcement at border. India has more than 200 minor ports in which such biosecurity provisions for checking of invasive alien species are very less comparatively. So, India is very vulnerable to the rising trade and weak enforcement of the biosecurity in its maritime borders. So, what are the India specific invasive alien species examples? Basically, India is a major importer or exporter of the exotic species. Invasive alien species in India enter through aquarium or pet trade. For example, mosquito fish, Gambusia species, guppy fish, Posilia reticulata, and angelfish, Pterophyllum sclerae. These are the various types of exotic fish species which have been introduced into India for ornamental purposes or pet trade purposes, and then they become invasive alien species. In case of food industry, example tilapia, which was introduced as a food, now become invasive in various internal waterways of the India. Again, other important example which is prevalent all over India is the Parthenium grass. Basically, this Parthenium grass, which is also called as the Congress grass in common parlance in rural India, is also entered India through PL 480 scheme, wheat import scheme, in which India imported wheat from the United States in 1955. This Parthenium grass is so widespread that even in the remote areas of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Parthenium grass is all pervasive. So, what is the impact of the invasive alien species in the context of India? Basically, as per the some expert estimates, India has lost more than $127 billion in last 6 years due to the impact of invasive alien species. India is second most financially affected country after the United States of America because of these invasive alien species. And the other important fact is that this $127 billion cost is based on the just 10 alien species, invasive alien species, impact caused by just 10 invasive alien species, but in context of India, there are more than 2000 invasive alien species. So, so far only 3% of the invasive alien species have been documented in the context of economic impact, and rest are either underreported or untracked. Aquatic invasive alien species impose a greater burden than terrestrial ones because of its high cost in the health, fisheries and water systems. Also, yellow fever mosquitoes are major financial and health liability in the context of coastal population. Then, so what is the measures needed, or what is the policy approach needed to tackle the threat of this invasive alien species? First and foremost is regarding the one biosecurity approach. Basically, in this, as per this one biosecurity approach suggested by the environmental expert, India needs to enforce strict biosecurity at ports and borders, land borders, then developing real-time species tracking and early warning systems in the context of invasive alien species, then promotion of inter-agency collaboration among the different ministries and scientists to maximize the knowledge generation about potentially invasive alien species that can have impact. Then mandating post-trade biological impact assessment in the quarantine zones at the port. Basically, strengthening of the policies to curb the invasive species is vital for protecting the biodiversity, but rising of global trade and weak infrastructure to have a biosecurity inspections, institutions, regulation keep the risk of their spread very high in the context of India. So, what is the long-term risk assessment or outlook by the expert of these invasive alien species, not just for the India but also for the world? it says that global freight transport is expected to triple by 2050, which will lead to the increase in the invasive alien species risks, particularly via maritime or air cargo, which allows faster and broader species survival and spread. Effects of today's invasions, that is, for example, in 2025 will only be visible after few decades later. Strengthening biosecurity is the urgent to prevent the future ecological and economic crisis because of these invasive alien species. One biosecurity framework like One Health approach is crucial to manage the threat of invasive alien species effectively. So this is about the one biosecurity framework for tackling the threat of invasive alien species. This is the practice question. Invasive species specialist group that develops global invasive species database belongs to which one of the following organization? Please solve this question. Now, the last topic of today's, that is resetting of the India-US partnership in uncertain times. What is the backdrop? Recent drift in the India-US ties, in relevance from GS2, that is the effect of policies of and politics of developed and developing nations on the India's interest. So, let us start. Basically, when just few months ago, when Trump has started second round of his presidency, India and US were ready to deepen their ties, and that has been described as defining partnership of the 21st century. This was visible through high level engagements like Prime Minister Modi's meeting with President Trump, as well as our External Affairs Minister Jaishankar's presence at the inauguration reflected the mutual goodwill in the Washington and strategic optimism in New Delhi. But within few months of Trump's presidency, there has been a growing unease between in New Delhi, not due to the rupture, but because of the significant drift in the India-US ties. So, basically, what are the causes of this? Recent tactical and rhetorical moves from Washington reflect the growing volatility, inconsistent policies and troubling return of the outdated strategic thinking in the US President's office. So, let us go into the detail of this drift in the ties. So, what are the recent developments that have triggered the India's discomfort or drift in the ties between India and US? So, first and foremost is return of outdated hyphenation policy of America, in which India and Pakistan are treated as equivalent strategic concerns. In the aftermath of Operation Sindhu, US President Trump spoke of India and Pakistan in the same breath, offering mediation on the Kashmir issue. This language was diplomatically regressive and against the stand of India. Then, disconcerting economic signals given by the Trump administration. Trump discouraged Apple for expanding its manufacturing operations in India, and this particular development undermines India's support to the China plus one strategy, and also it weakens efforts to position India as a global manufacturing hub. Then issues with the immigration policies, inconsistent immigration policy by the United States administration. The H-1B visa regime, which was for long was a cornerstone of India-US technological cooperation, now appears to be vulnerable and it is susceptible to the political posturing and protectionist rhetoric given by the Trump. Then shift towards more favorable stance on Pakistan. Basically, in the context of Iran-Israel war, US Central Commander described Pakistan as a phenomenal partner in counter-terrorism. So, this kind of extraordinary characterization of an institution long associated with nurturing cross-border terrorism is against the India's strategic interest. So, we have seen what are the major points of discomfort between India and US. So, what are the reasons for this drift? Why this drift is occurring? So, the first and foremost is regarding the transactional approach under the presidency of Trump by the USA, which puts emphasis on the short term gains over the long term alignments or long term strategic thinking that is needed for the superpower like US. Whereas in case of India, India's strategic culture is rooted in patience, depth and civilizational perspective, and this approach often clashes with the Washington's preference for the quick deal approach. The US tendency to commercialize diplomacy is in conflict with the India's long term strategy driven approach to the geopolitics. So, this is basically the transactional approach of the USA under Trump presidency. Then strategic utility of Pakistan is still overstated or overemphasized in certain sections of US national security establishment, which continues to view Pakistan as a familiar partner in the context of Afghanistan long war of America in Afghanistan, as well as the counter-terrorism efforts of America. Then misunderstanding of the India's strategic autonomy. Basically, India's emphasis on the strategic autonomy has been misunderstood as well as misinterpreted by the US as a fence sitting rather than principled assertion of the sovereignty. Next is regarding the structural asymmetries in influence and communication persistence. Basically, author argues here that India's rise, whether it is economically or geopolitically, is real, but its institutional footprint in Washington lags behind its ambitions, leading to the misunderstanding of the India's strategic intentions in Washington DC. One of the strategic thinker, Ashley Tellis, argues that India suffers from great power delusions and that the relationship falters because India's ambitions outstrip its capabilities in the context of Washington DC. However, this diagnosis is flawed. The real risk lies not in India's aspirations but in Washington's impatience with partners who do not mirror American methods or American priorities as their own. So, what are the measures needed for resetting of the ties, or what are the strategic steps that should be taken by India? The first and foremost is regarding the quiet, persistent and calibrated diplomacy which should be the preferred method by the India. Author argues here that dramatic responses to the US hasty moves will only exacerbate misunderstanding between the two strategic partners. Prioritization of defense cooperation, Quad initiatives, intelligence sharing and convergent interest of in the Indian Ocean to the Pacific Ocean remain the strong foundations of India-US relationship in recent times. Second advice is regarding the broadening and deepening of India's engagement beyond the traditional diplomacy and diplomatic means or ways, like leveraging the Congress, US Senate or Congress, then leveraging the various policy think tanks in the Washington DC, utilization of Indian American diaspora as a mean or key instrument of the strategic advocacy between India and US. The third advice is regarding the India's accelerating internal economic reforms, which will bolster the investment, manufacturing and long-term confidence in the Indian economy from America. It will also providing regulatory clarity and modernizing infrastructure as a strong credential for becoming a premier global economic production hub. Then regarding the India must see immigration issue as a shared opportunity. This H1B visa regime is an instrument of mutual innovation between India and US. In the context of this, movement of skilled talent and collaborative ecosystems of technology entrepreneurship and joint development of the next generation frontier technologies should be at the center of India-US relationship. So, these are the measures suggested. Then in the context of USA, author suggests that USA must abandon its Cold War framings or Cold War mentality regarding or treating India's manufacturing or talent as a threat superpower position. So, if the Indo-Pacific strategy of the United States has to be endured, it must be matched by concrete investment in the context of India's regional capacity building initiatives. Then rediscovery of the moral purpose of partnership. Here, author argues that India-US relationship is about shaping democratic, pluralist and rule-based world order, and this particular India-US relationship is not merely about balancing China in the Indo-Pacific or accessing the each other's market through purely economic perspective, but it goes beyond that in the context of democracy, democratic tradition, pluralist society and rule-based world order. So, as to conclude, once the US President George W. Bush said that world will see what two great democracies can do when they trust each other. It is the spirit that we must summon again today, and the structural logic of the partnership between India and USA remains robust. What is required is now a reset, not of fundamentals but of tone, clarity and mutual commitment to each other's relationship. Real test of partnership lies not in how it behaves in moments of celebration, but how it endures in times of stress in bilateral relations. So, let us start with the practice question. Recent drift in the India-US relation marked by USA's renewed engagement with Pakistan reflects deeper challenges in sustaining the long-term strategic convergence. Critically examine the causes and implications of this drift. Also suggest measures that India can take to recalibrate partnership in its favor. Please write the answer of this particular question. This is all for today. Thank you.